Just a comment that I think we heard almost from 3 speakers. It's about the type of commodity that we are moving and the fact that they are changing. It is, I think, very important to note that. And I found, although we talked mostly about crude oil in this workshop, we do need to recognize that there is also the dilbit, the diluted bitumen, everything that is. And in the dilbit, we often know a lot less about the dill than the bit. And the dill is, for a French person like me, it's like cheese. The composition varies enormously. And there is tremendous efforts to understand what it could do to the environment. So maybe, I'm not sure there is anything for the panel to comment, but I find at least for 2 of the presentations we've heard that the composition changes, and sometimes we're not up to date in knowing what we are dealing with and what would be the impact.
Any panelists want to offer a comment on that? I would ask panelists just to quickly summarize the questions for the webinar audience.
So maybe I can start out. The question was in relation to the various compositions of dilbit and other links, as I mentioned earlier, to the varying components of crude oil. So there is some extensive research going on in the U.S. and Canada is working with PHMSA and the Energy Department on some of that research that's going on. So I won't speak, in detail to that, but there certainly is a very extensive amount of work going on there. And under the Oceans Protection Plan that I mentioned, there is also considerable work going on and will go on further in the area of the response to these products in the water, including dilbit and others. So there is work going on looking at those components and how they react.
Yeah, just to add, I think, it's a good question, Jerome. I think there are at least a couple issues. One is any implications of the dilbit that change different composition within a pipeline and how that has, any implications for, kind of wear stress on the pipeline. I haven't looked into that research much. I know some people have talked about concerns with that, but that's something worth exploring. And then the additional one is just if there is a spill, what the implications are, kind of ecological, other implications of that material out in the environment, how that might be different from standard crude oil. Obviously, just the general issue is when you've got a heavier crude and then more potential for sinking. So that's what happened with the Kalamazoo River spill, and so that made the cleanup that much more challenging because there was so much that was sinking, getting into the soil sediments, wetlands, and so on, and not being is easily removed, skimmed off, or otherwise collected. So that's definitely an implication. But yeah, in fact, the IJC project that Matthew mentioned, we'll be looking at a bit at the kind of potentially ecological implications of spills, including considering the different types of components, diluted bitumen versus crude oil, like I think Akshon Pratt, and I think maybe here from Linnotech is coordinating that work, right? So yeah, we're definitely interested in looking at that project. But I think there's been some other work, but I think there still needs to be more research into that.
Thank you. With that question, what I'd like us to be able to say about it is that Enbridge is constantly testing the ground sediment and reporting back to the agencies in the state with regard to the dilbilgin, and that's been an important part of the process to recognize, because those have long-term consequences. Leaching into the water table is the primary concern about that. At least with the measurements that I have seen, most recently, there isn't that concern that it has reached the water table and leached down that far, at least at this point in time, okay, with the reports that I am seeing. And, but I think it's one that you always have to continually model, and you have to put it in your long-term model, because it's like if you just do the short-term analysis on it, saying there's no consequences because it's not reaching that far. You have to think about things like that in long-term perspectives, more than 5 years, by 10 or 15, with that. Thank you.
Back, I get a mic to the table there. Go ahead, sorry, sir. Go ahead. And then we'll go over here.
Thank you. Jerome, I think, raises a very important issue on materials composition. And I think Transportation Canada's done a tremendous job on the deal bit issue. But what I'm questioning or concerned about is Syncrude. That's an increasing volume of material that's flowing. Canada has some very good experience on a rail spill in the Sudbury area in 2013. Syncrude is pre-processed. It basically has inherent dispersants in it through the processing procedures. What I'm wondering, are you looking at environmental impacts on this material because it'll react quite differently from light crudes, which I believe is currently classified as?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll be honest, I haven't really looked at that issue much. Yeah, and so, I mean, obviously just having a good handle on the composition of the different mixtures, important, the different constituents in there, and with implications for, again, different ecological impacts, potentially, different constituents, but yeah, I haven't really followed up on that issue.
Yeah. It's Lorraine Kinney here. So no, I'm not a super expert on the various components, and I'm not aware of what may be going on in regards to those kinds of similar testing. I would think there is some, but as I say, I can't speak to it.
Do you all mind repeating the questions for people online?
So yeah, the question was on increasing use of synthetic crudes, and including there was the rail spill in 2013, I guess, that Transport Canada and others have followed up on studied that involves synthetic crude, and so just what the implications are, say, for maybe kind of managing these risks going forward.
Yeah, what I'd like to be able to say about, because I'm not the person that's going to know the answer to this question, but what I am willing to do, if you look at your contact list in your folder, you'll see my name and an email. If you email me that information, I will make sure that it gets back to the Pipeline Safety Advisory Board for the state of Michigan, so that way it's in the alternative analysis or the risk analysis, whichever is more appropriate with that. But I appreciate the questions. I'm not the personnel, but I can find out the answers. Thank you.
Question for Homer Mendoza, Mary Ellen Geist, Director of Television's Great Lakes Bureau. There is some movement afoot, I believe in northern Michigan, by some Indian tribes to prove sovereignty over certain lands, I believe 1865 treaty. And there are just rumors that in the event it was proven that sovereignty by a judge, which I believe is going to court right now, that some of those tribes would then say they had the right to have those pipelines removed from their lands. Can you just talk a little bit about that? And is that something you say Enbridge has been working with you, but is that something you could, as a tribal nation or as a gathering of tribal nations, demand that the pipelines be removed on lands that you would then be proven to have ownership of?
Okay, thank you. The question is about sovereignty issues with the tribes in the Upper Peninsula, probably speaking to the Cora tribes in that region. And they're
northern Michigan, the Consky area, Mullen Lake, at Point City.
over in Little Traverse and Grand Traverse area. Okay, yeah. And they're also part of the Cora tribes initiative and the ability to shut down Line 5 with that. I'm not the expert on their sovereignty because each tribe will have its own sovereignty and trust and treaty applications. So how they're applying it, I don't want to misconstrue or misanswer that. But the general approach from it, just high level, is that there are certain treaty rights that if they're infringed upon, then they can file claim either against the state or against the United States government and have those claims reviewed by federal court processes. And that's probably the avenue that they're thinking about in that type of situation, is whether or not they can apply their sovereignty through treaty rights to get a court order to shut down the line. I don't know all the details, so I'm not necessarily the person. I can probably speak to it, but I don't really want to speak more than that at that level, because they may have their own strategies, and they definitely have their own points that they want to make on that, and it's important. But that's one reason why to have tribal consultation, and even in meetings like this, so is that you have those understandings. With Michigan having 12 federally recognized tribes, And we have 12 hours drive time. We can drive 12 hours from our reservation in southern Michigan and hit the Upper Peninsula tribes on the west side. 12 hours drive time to the south. I'm in Atlanta. So there's quite the range there, and each community has its own sovereignty and treaty protection. So, but those are good conversations, and I'm glad it's coming up here because I think it does promote the awareness of issues like that out there. Thank you.
Tara, do we have any questions on the line?
Nope.
No? Any questions?
Other questions?
Any hands up?
Yes, hi, I'm Shelley Cat from Montreal, and it sort of builds on a couple of the previous questions. In today's world with petroleum, like who knew that we were going to have a glut at one point? Everybody years ago, we were thinking, oh, we're running out, and we end up with a glut. We have these, new modes of production, obviously with shale and what, since the past is not a very good indicator of the future anymore when it comes to crude oil in particular, how do governments, how well are governments and those involved in response? Of course, you guys, I guess, perhaps Transport Canada is the best on this one. How are you linked in? How do you keep track of what's happening, for example, with production? On the production end, let's just talk about crude coming from Canada into the U.S. There are changes there. I understand that, most of the projections have been that we're going to have more and more dilbit and less Syncrude. But now I'm hearing, oh, actually, no, Syncrude is on the move. So with these changes, how do you keep up with what's happening at the origin so that you can predict down the line what kinds of crude you might need to be dealing with in what kinds of volumes?
So thank you for the question. In terms of the question, it was how do you look forward with all the changes that are happening in the various production types and the different kinds of crude production? How do you look forward to what the future risks might be and future challenges will be? How do you manage those? And I think that is the area of the research and the collaborative work together between certainly Transport Canada and PHMSA to look at the research on what is out there now, what is being tested, and we've done joint testing studies with PHMSA, where we've gone out and taken samples of Canadian producers as they're loading in the transshipment. And then the U.S. has done the same thing. We compare the results. We look at things that we didn't know about those products or do know, or what do we need to adjust. We're looking at how our testing processes go to be aware of things like the differences in these back-end formation products, for example, are much more volatile. So the open cup testing that was being used to classify the product didn't work that well. So now we need new testing, and we're working on those areas. But I would also suggest that as well as that research and collaborative work, there's the whole big data part, and so we need to really be taking advantage of those trends that you can start to find in the signals of changes in big data. And so we have some beginning work going on that in Transport Canada. And the final point I'd make on that is crude is very, very important, and we do need to be focused on the issues and how we manage that. But we have a whole series of other dangerous goods out there. And so it's important from our perspective to think about investing that research across some of those the toxic inhalants, and some of the other dangerous goods that are also moving through communities need to be considered as well.
We have another question.
Just a quick response to that. PHMSA is going to be a key agency to pay attention to, because when you have all of these additives or different derivatives of substances going through, they're the permitting agency. So, and to emphasize there is, what is their consultation process with the public at large, with the local and state agencies and the tribal jurisdictions, that are along that line route. And also consider the cascading events, because even if you have a spill at one site, this spill can move 35 miles in another direction. And they have to take that into consideration with those additives and what the response plans would be. So, PHMSA holds a very key important because they're the permitting agency for that substance that's going into those pipelines. So, thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, and when you look at oil going forward, my assumption is, looking at EIA reports and forecasts and all that, is that we're likely not going to be finding a lot of new reservoirs of traditional crude oil, because we've been looking quite a bit. I would think that we would probably know about most of them. I think in some parts of the world we do occasionally find them. So I think in particular in North America we're going to be producing more and more, I would imagine, the oil sands, the tight oil, from the tight oil formations, that kind of thing. So so I think, we just need to be prepared for that kind of world where what we're using is going to be more and more made up of that component.
Over to Tim, and then I think a chat might have come in, Tara, maybe we can do that next.
No, that was something different.
Here we go, try to see how the feedback is. Okay, so thank you very much. It was a really good set of presentations. My question is for Mike. Mike, you had a nice slide about recommendations and what the National Wildlife Federation wanted to see in terms of alternatives. Recommendations there, thank you. What I don't see up there is consideration of what the alternative might be if one assumes that oil is going to move, which isn't given for all interest groups, I acknowledge that. But if one does assume that oil is going to move, how is the National Wildlife Federation approaching consideration of alternatives? Are you analyzing them? Do you have a preference? Let me put you on the spot too much, but there's a lot that goes into the alternative. I just wonder what your analysis process might look like.
Right, yeah, that's a good question, Tim. Actually, we're hoping Michigan gets it all figured out with this alternatives analysis.
Just quickly repeat the question.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So, Tim's question, Tim Meader's question was on the potential alternatives to oil transport in, say, modes. So, say, for example, if Line 5 were going to be decommissioned, what would happen? What's NWF's position on that? And we're, to be honest, we really haven't looked as much at that. We've kind of partly figured that it will have to happen, and obviously a lot of people will be involved, industry, obviously involved in agencies, and we want to have input on that, but we haven't, that's something we haven't done internally as kind of our own analysis. We've emphasized a lot, as indicated up here, that just the idea of using less oil and trying to go to alternatives, more conservation, more fuel-efficient vehicles, that kind of thing. And we know we're still going to be using oil for quite a while into the future. So in that regard, we want to try to avoid moving oil through very sensitive areas. So as to the extent possible, the lakes, particularly the straits. So that's the reason for the position on that, trying to decommission Line 5. Realize it's there's a lot of efforts that have been underway that Enbridge has taken, try to ensure safety and that kind of thing, which we appreciate. But we think it's just one of those areas that's inherently sensitive, inherently a bit risky. If you just weren't operating there at all, you obviously pretty much eliminate the risk versus even if it's a low risk. And like we heard today, it's maybe a low probability, high potential impact situation with a release, that kind of thing. So at any rate, but in terms of alternatives, we recognize there's going to be more oil moving via maybe it's pipelines elsewhere, rail. We know there are plenty of problems with rail, other modes. There's no shipping oil now on the Great Lakes. So, but at any rate, that's something. Short answer, it's something we haven't really done any kind of assessment of that. But we'll definitely look to the Michigan's alternative analysis, see what comes out of that, and then any other work that's going on, and then that might help inform our thinking.
Time for one or two more questions. Jerome?
Thank you. I have a question for Rory, who mentioned the Ocean Protection Plan. Previous studies conducted for Transport Canada showed that the St. Lawrence River in particular is the sector in Canada that is the most at risk for oil refined products spills from marine shipping. And the question is, when we look at the OPP and its structure, why is there not a better recognition of freshwater in that large program that is mostly supporting British Columbia?
So thank you for the question. The question is about the Oceans Protection Plan that I mentioned earlier, and the question focuses on the relative value or importance, I guess, from the question, perceived as being not as high on the Great Lakes or the St. Lawrence and the freshwater side. So I would say that the program is a national program. The Oceans Protection Plan was deliberately designed and is including all parts of Canada, including the three oceans and the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence. So there are initiatives in all of those. There are elements that are, as I say, very completely national. And so some of the timing on some of the initiatives are aligned with other things that are going on. And so in BC, there's a number of issues of concern right now that are being addressed and are actually being announced in this particular initiative. There's a significant investment on the East Coast as well, and in the Arctic. And there are elements that are focused on the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence. To go back to the risk assessment that underlies some of that work, we do have pilot projects going on the area response plans and the ability to take the risk assessments down one step and then look more closely at particular areas and develop plans around that. And one of those pilots is in that area. So I think it is being well addressed. Thank you.
Well, I'm not seeing any more hands.
If I may.
Sorry, of course.
If I may, just, and this will be real quick, is that just a little bit of a game to play is how many tribes are there in the United States? And so throw out a number. Let's play a little bit of a game.
200?
200 higher,
Including 360.
including Alaska.
360.
360 higher,
500.
higher,
12.
up a little bit lower.
500. $1.
But just to finish playing the game a little bit, I'd like to spark that interest because there's 567 tribes in the United States that are federally recognized. Now there's more waiting for application, but that points out that they should be involved in this consultation process, with the states and with the federal processes that are going on. Many of the agencies have tribal consultation baked right into them. PHMSA is not one of them, one of the few. But there's plenty of opportunity to have dialogue. Army Corps of Engineers, we get plenty of notices from them. Trying to decipher them is the challenge, from my point. I'm a police officer, a criminal justice major, so I come at it from a little bit of a different approach. I'll think about emergency management, but to think about it, in the technical guru arena of engineering or pipeline studies, I'm here because I'm an elected official for tribal governments, but I'd like to be able to promote that because, we have liability issues out there just as well, and we're willing to come to the table and be an important stakeholder. So, thank you.
Thanks to all our panelists. One quick final round of applause.